Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I have a number of family that live down this area, so it's always nice to come down and visit. Also, I did not think this would be the first time all year I use my ice scraper on my car. But, and as we get into the discussion later on about priorities, maybe we can talk about climate change. But no, it's an honor to be here. It's a real honor to be up here with all these elected officials, and particularly Mr. Jones, Mr. Miller, Mr. Price. I want to thank you all for the letter to the President urging the end of combat operations in 2013. The President needs to hear that he has the political support to do things differently in Afghanistan, that he has the support to bring the troops home. And this needs to become a campaign issue. It was a campaign issue in 2006. And one of the things that I get frustrated with over the last several years is that the recognition that, well, maybe the Iraq War was more of a political issue against Bush than it was against the Iraq War. Because certainly you have not seen organizations that are rooted in the Democratic Party, Move On or Labor or other groups, go against the President on this. And that needs to change. I think the President needs to lead that change. But in order to do that, he needs to know he has the political support to do so. And so, again, I hope this becomes a campaign issue. The other thing, real quick, I want to make sure everyone's aware of is the story of Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. Colonel Davis is an active duty Army officer who has been in Afghanistan twice and who has submitted classified and unclassified reports to Congress. Mr. Jones is one of the primary recipients of those reports. Please take the time to Google Daniel Davis, Afghanistan, and New York Times, and read the article that Scott Shane wrote about Colonel Davis. Additionally, if you go to the New York Times @War blog, you'll see that there's a link to Colonel Davis's 86-page unclassified report. It's very important, and I urge everyone to read it because it's very, very significant. We spend about $1 trillion a year on national security. That's what you get when you add the defense, the intelligence community, the State Department, Veterans Affairs, Department of Energy nuclear programs, plus service on our national debt, because we're paying for all this on a credit card, so you have to include that. It comes out to about $1 trillion a year. Of that, Afghanistan is a pretty significant segment. The last several years, we've seen costs of Afghanistan run to over $100 billion. This year, we expect it to be about $90 billion. All told, both the Iraq and Afghan wars have cost us directly about $1.4 trillion. And studies using U.S. government data from the Veterans Administration as well as from the Department of Defense by Harvard economists as well as a team from Brown University have told us that, look, those costs, long term, those indirect costs, the cost of taking care of our vets when they get older, they're going to equal these direct operational costs. So these wars are something that we are going to be spending tens of billions of dollars on for decades. Okay, peak costs for Vietnam veterans are just occurring now because those vets are in their 60s and 70s. Our vets who are 25 right now, we won't feel those peak costs for another 40 or 50 years. So that's something that we have to understand. And this is on top of a $525 billion defense request for this year. $525 billion not including the war in Afghanistan. In 2001, our defense budget was about $300 billion. So just on the base defense budget alone, over the last decade, we've seen it grow 75%. And that's because of the priorities that we've chosen as a nation. And what we're seeing that our society is eroding. And we're doing even greater harm to future generations by the choices we're making right now. So what we're doing is we're handing off to future generations an America that's not the same America that we received. It's a lesser America. It's, the way I like to think of it is it's a sick, hollow American colossus that our children and our grandchildren are going to inherit and have to deal with. Real quick, you look at the defense budget, and there are 3 areas that you can, right away, you can cut. Things that shouldn't be controversial. Things that people who want a strong American defense and want a strong America should agree on. Waste. Everyone's aware of all the stories of cost overruns. Everyone's all aware of stories of weapon procurement programs that have been delayed or that have not delivered what was promised. Major programs that have gone on for decades. And the fact that the Department of Defense has not done anything to rectify that is atrocious. But even at the smaller level, The $700 hammer and a $2,000 toilet seat is alive and well. Just spoke to my friend who's on the USS Cole the other day, and they're redoing some of the computer systems on the ship. And a computer server that a local business here would buy for $1,000 costs the Navy $16,000. A 17-inch computer monitor that you and I can go to Best Buy or I guess Circuit City's out of business, but go to Best Buy and get for a couple $100. The Navy has to spend $1,800 on it. So I mean, and this is a Department of Defense that's, let alone failed audits, it's never been audited. So I think this is something that we as a people should all be able to agree on, no matter how you feel about national defense. Overhead and management. A story I like to tell is when I was a kid, went to the Pentagon, and you get that brochure that tells you how big the Pentagon is. And this was in 1985. And the brochure tells you there's X amount of miles of corridor, and there's X amount of cups of coffee drinking every day, and there's 24,000 people that work in the Pentagon every day. When I went back there with the Marine Corps in 2002, 1985, there were 2.2 million active duty service members. When I went back there in 2002, when there was 1.4 million active duty service members, a reduction over a third of the force, there were still 24,000 people working in the Pentagon. And now that number is 30,000 people. And if you look, if anyone's been to DC, if you look from the south in Arlington looking up towards DC, from the Key Bridge in Roslyn down to National Airport in Alexandria, or near Alexandria, that is all one massive military-industrial complex. It's something I think that Eisenhower would be completely aghast at. And an overextension. We've got 800 bases around the world. We've got 80,000 troops in Europe. And the Cold War ended, when I graduated high school in 1991. We've got 50,000 troops in East Asia. We've got 11 aircraft carrier battle groups. Nobody else has one aircraft carrier battle group. The Chinese bought a rusting old hulk of an aircraft carrier that the Soviet Union had built decades ago. They just put some paint on it and they got her out to sea this past year. Maybe in a decade she'll be operational, maybe. But the point is the Chinese did not buy that aircraft carrier to fight the American Navy in the Pacific. They don't want to recreate Midway. They're not suicidal. What they bought it for is because in 20 or 30 years, they want to make sure they have access to those areas of the world that have energy resources because they predict an energy crisis in 20 or 30 years. They are prioritizing their national defense purchases and their strategy based upon what the country needs in the future. And that's something we're not doing. And I'm not going to talk about what's important to North Carolina because I'm a guy from Jersey, so that's probably the last thing you guys want to hear is what I think. You have your members here who can talk at the local level much better than I. But on a national level, where we're propelling this country, where we're at right now, you look at just some key indicators of what the strength and the health of this country is. The World Economic Forum says we're the 52nd best math and science education program in the world. 52nd. The American Society of Civil Engineers rates our infrastructure as a D. The World Economic Forum 5-6 years ago had us as 6th in the world in infrastructure. We're now down to 26th. And in healthcare, and by no means am I saying that we should put money into all this and dump money, take money from defense and dump it someplace else, because that probably won't work. Because you look at healthcare, according to the Commonwealth Foundation, when you look at us compared to our peers, we spend twice as much as everyone else on healthcare, but we're at the bottom when it comes to quality, efficiency, and equity. So it's a question about priorities, and this should all be very staggering. This is something that we should be having a conversation on and a real dialogue on. And again, there's common ground on this. If you believe in a strong defense, if you want America to be a strong America, hey, guess what? You can't have the world's best military in 20 years from now if we're 52nd in the world of math and science. You're not going to be able to steer those aircraft carriers straight if those kids can't do simple math and science. You can't. The infrastructure, which is the backbone of this nation, the reason we had the best military in the world for the last 50 years was because of investments we made in America in the 50s and 60s. The Eisenhower interstate system was the backbone that created and spurred the greatest industrial nation the world has ever known. That's falling apart in front of our eyes. Three-quarters of 17 to 24-year-olds are unfit for military service, according to the Department of the Army, because of health, fitness, education, or criminal issues. And I guarantee you the criminal issues are just a small factor in that. So, altogether, we should be recognizing we have tremendous challenges in this country, and we've made really poor choices. I also want to say that I get outraged, and I know it's a term that Mr. Jones uses a lot, and it's the right term to use, outraged, that, while we're still fighting in Afghanistan, while the wounds from Iraq are still fresh, the drumbeats for war with Iran are getting louder each day. That's outrageous. So I want to thank everybody for coming here today. I know, assemblies like this, you're usually preaching to the choir, but I really appreciate it. And two things before I finish here and introduce Mr. Jones. The first, if you're interested in this type of information, there are two really great websites to go to. One is, and it's simple because they're literally the same names. One is costofwar.com. That's run by the National Priorities Project. Ton of information and sources in there, and it links you to the government data that tells you how much we're spending on things, as well as what authorizes the various national defense acts. And then the second one is called costofwar.org. The first one is cost, singular. This one is cost, plural. So costofwar.org. And this is a report put together by Brown University that goes into detail the financial, the social, the human costs of our misadventures, for lack of a better term, in Iraq and Afghanistan. The second thing I want to bring up is, and again, I'm preaching to the choir here, but groups like Peace Action, these gentlemen here, they need your help. Trying to change this, you're going up against an establishment that is worth $1 trillion a year. They need your help in both time and in money. So if you believe what Betsy and what Peace Action does, or what these gentlemen are trying to do here and trying to change our policies in Afghanistan and bring our troops home, trying to keep us out of war with Iran, please help them, please support them with your time and money. Again, I thank everyone for coming here this morning, and I look forward to the discussion. It should be great.